morning. Welcome to this Real Estate Developers webinar. It is indeed our pleasure to have you this morning. To the Chairman of the Real Estate Board, Mr. Andrew James, CEO of the Real Estate Board, Mr. Phillip Chambers, Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Cresfroid Brown, Board Member, Mr. Carl Vendries, Revenue Officer, Mr. Jermaine Sims, inspectors and other members of staff of the Real Estate Board, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Real Estate Board's Developers webinar. Thank you for being here with us this morning and taking the time out of your busy schedule. We indeed truly appreciate it. I am Ainsworth Norton, Director of Timeshares and Manager for the Continued Professional Development, CPDs, here at the Real Estate Board. I will be your moderator for this morning. Joining us on the panel today is Mr. Carl Vendries. I do believe he deserves special mention. Mr. Vendries is the qualifying director for Millennium Properties Limited. He is also the longest serving board member for the Real Estate Board, having been a director for over 30 years, as well as a past chairman of the board. He is an industry stalwart with years of experience in the real estate industry and was also an integral part of the passage of the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act. He is also a board member of the Jamaica Developers Association. Mr. Vendries is a living archive of information relative to the historical context of our real estate market. Anyone who has met Mr. Vendries would certainly leave that conversation with at least knowing about the Duffus Commission of 1975, right, Mr. Vendries? So, Mr. Vendries, we welcome you, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this morning we have a very brief agenda, which should allow ample time for us not only to talk to you in detail about the developments as it relates to your sector, but also to hear and address your concerns as far as possible and legally permissible by the Real Estate Board. I'm now going to invite our chairman, Mr. Andrew James, to bring greetings to you at this time and set the stage for this morning's proceedings. Mr. Andrew James has been a real estate practitioner for almost 30 years. He is the managing director of A.S. James and Associates Limited, whose team of salesmen provides a full slate of real estate services, including sales and rentals, property management, leases, auctioneering, and valuations. Mr. James holds membership in both local and international associations, including the Realtors Association of Jamaica, having served as past president between 2019 and 2020, and is a past board member of the National Association of Realtors in the United States of America. He holds a diploma from the University of Technology, a bachelor's degree in management studies from the University of North Florida, and a master's in global information systems from the University of Leeds. So, Mr. James, we welcome you and we now invite you to take the floor and to give us your remarks.
Our moderator, Mr. Ainsworth Norton, our CEO, the Real Estate Board, Mr. Phillip Chambers, our main presenter, Mr. Cresfroid Brown, inspectors of the Real Estate Board, other board members, members of staff, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my pleasure to bring greetings and add my words of welcome this morning. We know that your time is valuable, so we thank you for investing that time into being here with us today. First of all, I want to welcome our new Chief Executive Officer, who took the reins of the organization in January this year. I believe this will be the first time many of you will be interacting with him. As I did with our dealers and salesmen on Monday, I now use this opportunity to formally introduce you to Mr. Phillip Chambers. In our many meetings and discussions since he took office, and I think I can confidently speak on behalf of my fellow board members in saying that I remain confident in his ability to articulate a vision for moving the organization forward, in keeping with the dynamism of real estate development. Real estate development is a very complex and multifaceted business. It is also a capital-intensive industry, with projects totaling well into the billions of dollars. It requires a contribution of various skills and competencies. It has also proven to be one of the most robust and resilient industries, which is especially important in the post-pandemic environment. Consequently, this affirms the need for development sustainability based on its impact on the wider community. For those developers who have committed to this process, successfully navigating the plethora of steps involved and continuing to invest heavily in the industry, this board and indeed this country owes you a debt of gratitude for your contribution to nation building. It would be remiss of me if I didn't admit that there have been instances we have observed in our regulatory capacity and via the media that have caused concern for the practice of real estate development. More specifically, these have negative implications for the integrity of the sector, with the potential to cause developers to fall into disrepute. This forum is also intended to address some of those issues and concerns. Our mandate, going back to our inception and legislation which brought us into force, is to protect the interests of hard-working Jamaicans and persons who buy land locally, some of whom do so without seeing the property. And this is why we must do the things we do as we balance the role of facilitator and protector. We thank you once again for being here and look forward to a very productive session. Good morning.
Thank you very, very much, Chairman James, for that. And now we will move to our CEO, Mr. Phillip Chambers. And so we'll invite him now to address us at this time. But before he does, I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Chambers, sorry. Mr. Chambers has been with the Chief Executive Officer of the Real Estate Board since January 2023, as the chairman had said previously. He has a wealth of experience in the areas of general, project, and personnel management within the maritime, aviation, and petroleum services acquired during his tenure as general manager of the Jamaica Aircraft Refueling Services Limited. He also has significant experience in government regulation and licensing, having served as Senior Director of Operations or Deputy CEO at the Cannabis Licensing Authority from 2021 to December 2022. He holds an MSc in International Public and Development Management and a BSc in General Management from the University of the West Indies, Mona. Mr. Chambers, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you, our moderator, Mr. Ainsworth Norton, Chairman of the Real Estate Board, Mr. Andrew James, our main presenter, Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Cresfroid Brown, Revenue Officer, Mr. Jermaine Sims, Inspectors of the Real Estate Board, other board members, members of staff, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I wish to thank you for taking the time to register and attend this morning's session. This, to me, is a clear indication that you are willing and open to listening and sharing, which allows both sides to learn from each other. Before I begin, I want to thank our chairman, Mr. Andrew James, for his vote of confidence in his opening remarks, and by extension, the board at large. I also wish to thank my entire team here at the Real Estate Board for the support and encouragement they have given me in this short space of time. It has given me much confidence that we will be able to achieve meaningful change and growth, working together for the good of the industry. This forum, which is one of three, with various clients and professional groups we serve, is a small but significant part of a collaborative approach. It is also an example of the kind of open and transparent communication we intend to practice. In furtherance of that principle, we will be launching a new merge website very soon, which will bring together information from the board, the commission, as well as the Real Estate Training Institute. In addition to this, we will be putting out as much information as possible via our social media and other platforms, and we invite you to follow us on those platforms. Additionally, we will continue to use our mass email platform to send timely reminders regarding a myriad of issues. I assume a number of you are as concerned as I am about the public perception of real estate developers based on the activities of some. These actions also adversely affect the perception of the board as regulators, even where these issues are not within the remit of the board. I want to encourage you to share honestly and openly, as I am asking you today, as we ventilate the issues at hand. We can only improve if we know what the gaps are, and those gaps are not always self-evident, but may differ based on one's perspectives. I also want to share a vision of fairness and objectivity with regards to our processes. We will ensure that our processes are not only known, but carried out consistently without fear or prejudice. This will apply to all areas of service. Personally, I'm a firm believer in the adage that there is wisdom in the counsel of many. We will ensure that our processes are not only carried out, but it is applied fairly and consistently across the board. In closing, I want to implore you to take personal responsibility for the reputation of the industry. Mr. Brown's presentation will go a far way in providing information that will allow you to practice without the threat of public opposition or criminal sanctions. As we transition into the question and answer portion of our program, thanks once again, and we look forward to the questions that follow. Good morning.
Thank you very, very much, Sir Chambers. Well received. All right, but before we go to the meat of the matter, which is a presentation by Mr. Cresfroid Brown, we will first divert to Mr. Jermaine Sims for a very important presentation that he has to do. It will serve both our constituents as well as the board well. So we are going to ask Mr. Sims, our revenue officer here at the Real Estate Board. Many of you will know him. You will be familiar with him because he has served the organization as a customer service officer for many years, having been with the organization since 2014. Mr. Sims will speak to the most efficient methods for making payments to the board to facilitate the proper identification and processing of your payments, which can be quite problematic for you as our stakeholders, as well as it has been for the board. So, Mr. Sims, please take the baton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norton. I'll take the opportunity, first of all, to say good morning to our CEO, Mr. Chambers, members of the board, our panelists, and of course, our attendees. I extend a good morning to you all. So as was mentioned, this section will be talking about our payment options, the most effective way in order to do so. All right, so for this portion, we will just go ahead, first of all, just to mention three things we'll be discussing today: our mission, the payment options, and then we'll basically summarize what we would have discussed. Now, part of our mission and our obligation to you is to create an effective model for regulating a real estate industry that ensures greater compliance of the industry and professionals, while earning and maintaining the confidence of all stakeholders. So this section, we wanted to pay keen attention to the latter portion of the statement in bold. We want to earn your confidence, and once we have earned that confidence, we actually want to maintain it. And in order to earn and maintain that confidence, part of our role is to ensure that whenever it is that you make payments to the real estate board, it doesn't matter how small it is. We want to ensure that that money that is paid to us is properly accounted for and credited to you. Now, as far as the real estate board is concerned, we have a number of payment options, specifically 5 of them. As on screen, you'll notice we have our BNS, bill payment option. We have bill payment through NCB as well. Unfortunately, at this time, the bill payment option is strictly limited to those 2 banks. But of course, if it is that you utilize other banks, then you can utilize a third-party transfer method. So that option is there for you as well. You can also come into office to make payments using your debit card or credit card or manager's check, or if you choose to do so at the bank. If it is you're out of town and you want to utilize the banks, you're able to do that as well. Now, just to give you a view as to what the bill payment option is like, you'll notice whenever it is that you make a bill payment option, there are certain critical information that is captured from the bill payment option. So you'll notice the date of the transaction, the name of the individual or the company that made that payment, along with the DV number or your registration number. You'll notice a confirmation number that uniquely identifies that particular transaction, and of course, the amounts. The same principle applies for the NCB bill payment. The DV number, the amounts, a confirmation number, and the date of the transaction. So these information, they are critical in terms of identifying your payment. Whenever you're utilizing these method, we are encouraging you to utilize your DV number. So don't just randomly on screen, you'll notice as an example, it's there as DV/123. That is strictly an example. If you use it, it will work. But the problem is sometimes it comes across without us being able to properly credit you, because the name, it may not be the name of the registered developer or the development. And that may pose a problem in terms of the funds being credited to you. So if you are not sure what your DV number is, you can call our offices, our customer service office, and you will be able to get that number so that your payments may be properly credited to you. The third-party transfer option on screen again, you'll notice this is a view as to what it looks like when it comes over to us. In some cases, when you make a transfer, it simply comes across just as you see on the first one. So you'll see the amount, you'll see a confirmation number, but of course, you'll notice something that is missing. That is a name. There's no name, there's no DV number. So in this case, we are not able to properly identify this payment. Below again, you'll see another instance. The funds may come across to us. We see the amount and we see a name. But when we check our records, there's no such John Brown. Perhaps John Brown is doing a development, but he's doing it under a company, a joint venture. And so until John Brown comes forward, then we won't be able to identify that payment as well. So just as a reminder, on screen, you'll see the 5 payment options listed there. We encourage you to use them and keep them in mind. A point to note as well in terms of keeping our mission statement to you, earning your confidence and maintaining it. We want to do so by having accurate information. And so once you make payments, we're encouraging you to send us a copy of that payment. So if you want to come in office and drop it off along with your application, so we don't necessarily want incomplete applications. Once you're going to make an application, ensure that you have a copy of your proof of payment attached. If you're emailing them, ensure that the proof of payment is emailed along with it, indicating the proper name of the developer who is making that application. And keep in mind, as far as developments especially are concerned, the old adage is true, that time is money. And so the consequence of not following through with these methods, or following through in terms of submitting a copy of your proof of payment to the real estate board, is the board meets generally once a month to approve applications. And so you may make an application, and so you make a transfer. But what happened? You don't submit your proof of payment. You may have submitted your documents, but you don't submit any proof. And so you may miss that meeting because as far as our records department is concerned, they have an incomplete application. And we don't want to have that situation. It may be that you may have to, your application have to wait until the next month. And so you may be losing out in that way. You may have persons, your clients who are depending on you to fulfill your end of the obligation. And so a simple thing as that, as not submitting your proof of payment, may have a big impact on you. And so we want to remove that. So we're just imploring you, we're encouraging you to utilize the proper payment methods. Utilize your DV number. That's basically your ID number. It uniquely identifies you. All your payments that you make, use your DV number. If it is you're not sure, you can contact us or customer service. The inspectors that you speak with, they will be able to provide you with that, with your DV number. We also encourage you as well, you may be dealing with an inspector as it relates to your application. And so at times you may be inclined to send your documents and your proof of payment to that individual. We want to encourage you as well, send your application, your proof of payment, your correspondences to the real estate board directly to our RHD support, at reb.gov.jm. And if you wish, you can copy that inspector on the email. So if it is you want them to know that you submitted something, you can copy them on it. The reason why this is recommended, there are a number of reasons. That officer may be out of office, he may be doing some inspection, or for whatever reason, he's not at work. And so you wouldn't want the fact that somebody is not at work for whatever reason, your application is not looked after. So you're encouraged to send your documents directly to the real estate board's email. And we have our IT department that will actually filter these emails. So if it is that a particular inspector is not available, then it will be assigned to another inspector who is also more than capable of handling your matter. So in summary, we just are encouraging you again, make your payments using the necessary credentials, the proper name. If it's a joint venture, ensure that everybody's name is there. Submit your proof of payment along with it, send it to the email. If you want to come to the office and drop it off, the option is there as well. It's very important. We have a payment verification form that is also on our website. If it is that you want to download a copy as well, or you want to come to the office and pick up a copy, that form allows you to complete it and indicate whether it's a transfer, which bank you're making the transfer from, which account number you send it to, the name of the individual. All that information is captured on that form. So you make a payment, complete that form, submit it along with all the necessary documents. And of course, again, email or drop off directly at the office. With the end result, updated and accurate records. We have an obligation to you, and we want to be able to fulfill that obligation as best as we possibly can to ensure that you are able to carry out your business. So with that in mind, I trust that the information was clear and informative, and we look forward to you following through in making your payments and submitting the necessary information. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Sims. That information was indeed beneficial, not only to our stakeholders, but it was also beneficial internally so that we are all on the same page. So thanks again, Mr. Sims. Now we are going to go to the meat of the matter, which is our presentation by our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Cresfroid Brown. I'm just going to ask you that while the presentation is going on, that you make note of your queries. You can make note of your queries in the chat that is there, but we are not going to be able to field your questions while the presentation is going on. All right, there'll be space and time given after the presentation for all your questions to be addressed. All right. So now I invite my colleague, Mr. Cresfroid Brown, our Chief Operations Officer, to speak to you on various areas of the practice of real estate and, real estate developments, really, some of which may be areas of concern or confusion. Mr. Brown was appointed Chief Operations Officer of the board in March 2023. He rose through the ranks of the board first as an inspector in 2006, then the manager of the board's inspectorate. He also served a brief period as the board's chief executive officer. He's a graduate of the University of Technology with a Bachelor of Science in Urban Planning. He has also done postgraduate studies at the Management Institute for National Development, aka MIND, in General Management. So, Mr. Cresfroid Brown, I hand this baton over to you, sir, and we look forward to your presentation.
Pleasant morning, all. Thank you, moderator. The board and the management of the board takes this situation in terms of this opportunity where we can speak to our constituents very serious, and we thank you for the opportunity and the time taken today to meet with us, discuss issues in relation to developers and critical information that they should be aware of going forward. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Just a minute. So sorry about that. All right. So today we'll be discussing the overview of the board, who is a developer, what is a development scheme for which the Act relates, why should developers be registered, responsibility of developers, advertising requirements for developers, what is a prepayment contract, trust account, and monitoring regime for developers. So the board would have been formed based on the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act 1987. The functions of the board is to monitor the activities of real estate developers, to make inquiries and collect information in relation to development schemes and developers, and generally to take all necessary statutory requirements in relation to monitoring of developers and to protect purchasers in these development schemes. So under Section 35 of the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act, gives us the power to determine applications for registration as a developer. It also gives us the powers to deal with our renewals of developers who are already on the register of developers. So for a developer to be on the register, there are certain requirements to be met, and Section 35, along with the regulations, spell out what these requirements are to register as a developer. All right. Section 5 of the Act, Real Estate Dealers and Developers Regulation, speaks to process the discharge of mortgages. So where a developer would have used purchasers' funds in a development scheme, which would have been collected under prepayment contracts, those funds are to be placed in a trust account. So where those funds are used in compliance with section 31(3), then the developer would have to lodge a mortgage on the title. So once that mortgage is lodged on the title, we would then remove that mortgage when the developer would have fulfilled his contractual obligation to the purchasers. So we would ask them to submit certain documentation, which includes payment of the prescribed fees. If it's a subdivision, copy of the compliance certificate from the municipal corporation. If it's the subject of a proposed strata development, a copy of the practical completion certificate for that development. And we'd want to satisfy that also that developer would have fulfilled all their contractual obligations to the purchaser. So if it is that they are supposed to provide certain amenities or utilities based on the specifications or drawings, which would have been stipulated in the prepayment contract, we would want necessary certification that speaks to these utilities. All right. Section 9 of the Act gives the board the power in relation to holding of inquiries. All right. Inquiries as it relates to a developer who may not have complied with the regulations, or if it is that he would have not forwarded necessary prepayment contracts, trust account, or there are complaints coming in where the development scheme is being undergoing on a very slow basis. Or if it's a case where there are breaches of the Code of Ethics, which is the 1998 regulations. So one would ask, who is a developer? Very important question. So a developer is a person who carries on or hold the part of the business of development of land, which involves undertaking building, engineering, or operations in or on or over land and making any material change in the use of land for disposal of such land. So developers can be individuals, group of individuals, corporate body, a group of corporate bodies. So as in the definition before in relation to developers who are undertaking developments for the disposal of lands, disposal as defined by the Real Estate Deeds and Developers Act speaks to selling, leasing, transferring, conveying, exchange, granting of license over, or alienating any interest over the land. So one would ask, if I'm doing a development and I do not intend to enter prepayment contracts, would I need to register? The answer is, it depends on the type of developments and the size of the development. So section 35(6) of the Act stipulates the type of developments which are required to be registered. So it speaks to the number of lots in which land is subdivided into exceeding 5, or if it has carried on another development of whatever size in the preceding 24 months. So case in point, an example. First time developer carrying out 5 lots, they will not need to be registered. But if they carry out a second development within 24 months of the first development of say 5 or less, they will need to register the second development. But overall, if they're undertaking developments 6 or more, which is subject of the, for example, Local Improvement Act, Town and Country Plan Act, they will need to register. If it's somewhat of a development which building approval has been granted and they intend to strata that said development, they will need to register. So this case point in example on this slide, you would have seen that the number of strata lots proposed to be carried out would have exceeded 5, or if they are carried another development of 5 or less within 24 months of the first, which have been 5 or less, they will need to register the second development. So implore developers, if you're not sure you need to register, you can always, for reference, go to section 35(6) of the Act or speak to our inspectors and we can offer guidance. So why is critical information that one should know? Why should a developer register? One, there's a legal requirement to do so. All right, failure to do so would result in criminal prosecutions. We would have a number of matters before the court in recent times where there was a developer who we would have engaged, informed of the relevant requirements to register. That party chose not to register, and we had to go to the courts to prosecute, and we were successful. So I always implore developers to follow the requirements because there are benefits now, and I go through the benefits. Not only is it within the legal ambits of the law, you're also allowed to legitimize any advertisements you're doing for that development schemes. You're able to procure prepayment contracts legally. You're able to utilize those purchasers' funds in that development scheme in compliance with the law section 31. At times, a number of persons are registered, including financial institutions who want to grant loans, prospective purchasers, attorneys at law, And bear in mind, you know, we are one of the government agencies that keeps a record of all developers and who they would have, with development scheme they would have done over a period of time. So we normally implore clients, we act as a referral point or a third party in which persons can verify our track record of developments that a developer would have undertaken, and whether or not those developers or developments would have been done successfully. So it's always good for developers to abide by the law, register. There's also a rebate in reduction in transfer tax, 75% reduction in transfer tax based on the transfer tax exemption order. And it goes for developments which they are undertaking for residential purpose. And these are whether townhouses, apartments, building units. So there are incentives, both legally, administratively wise, and financially to be a registered developer. So always implore developers to ensure that they follow the guidelines. So one may ask, should a developer register each development scheme being undertaken? The answer is yes. So your registration, although you meet the requirements to be a developer, 35(1) of the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act stipulates that every person who intends to create a development scheme should apply in the prescribed format. So if you want to take a development in St. Anne and you're on the register, that doesn't mean that you're doing a development in Montego Bay, you do not need to register. Once you fall within section 35(6), as stipulated before, you need to register each of the development schemes. I'm also going to implore also in relation to development schemes which are on the basis of disposal by will. So for argument's sake, John Brown's property owner, John Brown died. John Brown left a will that property is to be subdivided into 6 lots. And based on that will being probated, that the person would not need to be registered as a developer because there's an exemption in our act that speaks to disposal of property by will. However, say John Brown dies, the will speaks to 6 lots to be subdivided for each of the family member. And for one of those lots, Tom Brown got a lot, say for 1 acre. Then that 1 acre land he plans is further subdivided. Then Tom Brown and the first subdivision would undertake 6 or more. We need to register with us for that further subdivision that is undertaking. So that is a very key element that one should be aware of. So documentation required to register as a developer. These include payment of the prescribed fee. The application fee is in categories in a tier group, 6 to 20, 88,000, 21 to 40. The application fee is 121, and the development and the application fee for 41 and over is 165. Development fee of 7,000 per lot. There's also the completion of the prescribed form, police and bankruptcy clearance checks for all the parties involved. For corporate bodies, we need certified copies of the company documents, articles of incorporation, and the Form 23 depicting who the directors of the company are. We need information in terms of the land being developed, which should include a copy of the title, information of the registered address of the applicant, and proof of address of such applicant. One thing we should note, there's an applicable fee each developer should pay before commencing the development to avoid 100% penalty. So the 2010 Amendment Regulation stipulates that a developer must pay the applicable fee before commencing development, or unless there's 100% penalty that they are to be paid. Just a minute. How does one maintain their registration each year? All right, by payment of the prescribed renewal fee. So development 6 to 20, the renewal fee is 40,000, 21 to 40, 60,500. And development renewal fee 41 and over 99,000. So let me put it in context. John Brown is registered, say, June 2022. When April 1st, 2023 comes, John Brown, if the scheme is not complete, he will need to renew his registration. John Brown should not enter prepayment contracts or advertising lots for sale if his registration is not renewed. So if he has gotten full approval to undertake the development along with entering prepayment contracts and advertise, he has to maintain his registration while the scheme is ongoing. All right. If John Brown registered as John Brown / Brown Limited, that is a separate legal entity from John Brown in itself. So those are 2 separate registrations. So depends on who the registration has been issued for. renewal fee will have to be paid for that particular developer. All right. So the fees, as previously stated, 40,000 for renewal, 6,500, 99,000. So if John Brown has 6 developments, he will need to pay only 1 renewal fee based on the name of the developer. All right. Responsibility of our developers. So under the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Code of Ethics, 1998, developers should maintain an office. This is section 4, subsection 1 of the Code of Ethics. And also this demonstrates our place in that office in a conspicuous position, their registration that has been issued. So it's a requirement for developers to maintain an office. And it's good because purchasers can know where to locate the developers. The board, in kind of this inspection, can know where to locate the developer. The registration should also be maintained. Very critical. They should adhere to the provisions of the Code of Ethics as it relates to the professional conduct. A developer should ensure that under section 5, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 of the Code of Ethics, developers have certain requirements which they need to adhere to. So employ developers, they must maintain a level of professionalism, adhere to the necessary approvals as it relates to real estate developments. That is in the Code of Ethics. They should not desist or persuade anyone from seeking legal counsel. These things are stipulated in the Code of Ethics. They should act on the instruction of their clients and give due consideration. So these are guidelines and requirements under the Code of Ethics 1990 that developers should adhere to. They should also adhere to the requirements in respect to advertisement and how they should advertise. It also speaks to adhering to the requirement for entering of prepayment contracts. I will go through these matters separately later on in the presentation, as there are certain guidelines they will need to follow. One, and there are certain requirements that has to be met to enter prepayment contracts and advertise units for sale in a development scheme. They should also deposit all funds collected on a prepayment contract into a trust account maintained with an authorized financial institution. And bear in mind, this trust account should be maintained by him, which is the developer, as stipulated under the Act. That's under section 29 of the Act. All right. So the trust account should be maintained with an authorized financial institution. It's defined under the Act. Bank who a license has been issued to, registered building society, or deposit-taking institution. They should also lodge with the board a charge upon the land if purchaser's fund has been utilized in compliance with section 31(3) of the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act. Under section 28, they should forward a copy of all signed prepayment contracts within 14 days of signing by the parties thereto. They should also provide a report in relation to these deposits and withdrawals from the trust account. So section 29 would have stipulated that every time a developer would have collected any deposits or his agent, those funds are to be placed in a trust account and a report be forwarded to the board. All right. They should also provide supporting documents to the authorized financial institution prior to the withdrawal of funds. So section 31 stipulates the different reasons why withdrawals can be made. So transfer tax, payment of transfer tax, stamp duty to transfer the funds in another trust account, also based on estimates of works done or materials already supplied from either quantity surveyor and including the rescission of contracts. Or there's a further guideline where contracts would have been completed. So if the scheme is complete and prepayment contracts are complete, and those funds can be withdrawn and be held by the developer for that particular purpose. All right. They are also to provide written updates to the board and purchasers in relation to any delay in completion of the development scheme and the new estimated date of completion. So this is in the guidelines under the Code of Ethics. So the developers have a legal requirement. If for some reason, based on advertising or based on the contract, a timeline was given for the completion of the project and the timeline has not been met. So for argument's sake, the scheme should have been done December 2022, and we are now in March. Then developer should put in writing the new completion date, both to the board and to each purchaser. For prospective purchasers in strata developments, there are certain information that has to be provided. So this was included in the 2013 amendment regulations because purchasers will need to know what they are buying into. So for strata developments, a list of all common facilities in the complex, the estimate of unit entitlement for each strata lot, copy of the proposed bylaws, an estimate of projected maintenance for the strata lot, and specific items covered by this maintenance charge. So suppose, for example, items common facilities could include pool, gym. So these are the common facilities that they should forward to the prospective purchaser under point A. But the estimated charge in relation to the maintaining of the common area and what the charges cover should be issued to the prospective purchaser. And information on any payment in respect of the development going forward. All right. The board inspectors have certain powers under section 38. So upon demand, if a developer is non-compliant, I will ask them to put information with the trust account and prepayment contract. By issuance of a notice, the developer should comply with information being requested or provide a reasonable response as to why information cannot be provided. All right. Notice of any change in address, because I would have mentioned in the code of ethics, they are supposed to maintain an office. So for some reason, the developer was at, say, 20 Hope Road, and they now relocate to Trafalgar Road. Then a notice of change of address should be provided to the board by the developer. Changes in land ownership. Why this is critical, John Brown may have owned the property transferred to a third party. So the vendor on a prepayment contract has to be the registered developer under section 26. So if John Brown was a developer and property would have been transferred, then that may affect prepayment contracts going forward because the ownership would have changed and we don't have that particular person on the register of developers or any authorization thereof by the board based on the application provided. Including any mortgages or charge also. So for argument's sake, suppose John Brown got private financing from a private company and they were registered. There was no mortgage on the title. And for some reason, John Brown got a private financing and registered the mortgage on the title. That would affect John Brown's ability to enter prepayment contract. Section 26 clearly stipulates what type of mortgage or charge may be allowed for prepayment contracts to be executed. So I will go through that a bit further in the presentation. So advertisement requirements for developers. Developers must be registered or registration renewed for development scheme or respective phase of the development scheme. The vendor on a prepayment contract must be registered. This is under section 26 of the Act. All approvals for current development scheme have been obtained and lodged with the board. And this is in section 26 also. And the land subject of the development scheme is free from all mortgages or charges, save and except a mortgage in favor of an authorized financial institution, solely for the purpose of construction and financing. This is also stipulated in section 26 of the Act. So section 27 of the Act and the regulations, which will speak to paragraph 18 of the RDD regulations, 1988, along with the Code of Ethics, 1998, paragraph 13, stipulates what should be placed in the advertisement in terms of any development scheme by developers or their agents. That one, developer is registered. That should be included. The registration number of the development scheme, name and address of the developer, dimension and gross floor area of each type of building unit, the composition of the walls, flooring and roof of each building, sales price of each type of building. Very critical here, estimated time of commencement and completion, and whether or not there's an escalation clause. Very, very important. All right. So looking at prepayment contracts. So one may ask, what is a prepayment contract? So this is defined under section 2 of the Act. So it goes thus. This is one where monies would have been paid or payable to the vendor or developer under which at the time of entering into it, the vendor developer has obligations to be performed or discharged in respect of the building of roads or carrying out of any engineering or other operations in the development or where construction of the units or lots in development remain incomplete. So once the development scheme is incomplete and funds are collected, those are the subject of prepayment contracts. And those should be treated in a particular manner. So once prepayment contracts are entered and funds are collected, where are those funds supposed to be placed? So there are clear guidelines on the REDA. What is an authorized financial institution? A bank licensed to carry on the banking business, registered building society, institution licensed to carry on the business of accepting deposits. When and how right? And once those funds are be placed in the trust account, a report in compliance with the Act should be forwarded to the board. The following information must be provided to the board: development scheme to which the prepayment contracts relate, the name and address of the financial institution where the trust account is maintained, the account number for the trust account, name and address of the purchaser, the sum of money received from each purchaser, and the unit and lot to which this payment relates, the purchase price of the unit or lot, and the total payments to date in the account in respect of the development scheme. So for transparency purposes, the developer should give clear indication on the funds which are collected, who the funds relate to. And the Act would have acted as a guideline stipulating what should be provided and how it should be provided. All right. So once monies are lodged in the trust account, the Act under Section 31 stipulates the guidelines under which those funds can be withdrawn. All right, and they are as follows under Section 31. Payment certificates from a QS depicting rationale for withdrawals to certify works already done or materials already supplied, assessment for transfer tax or stamp duty. Under Section 32, proof that prepayment contract have been rescinded or completed, so they can make the necessary withdrawals. If it's rescinded and they are to get refunds, that's one reason they can make the withdrawals from the trust account. If the scheme is completed and the developer wishes to pay whether his creditors or himself and the development scheme is complete, and those funds can be dealt with how the developer so wishes. All right, there's another instance where suppose the developer would want to withdraw funds from the trust account to place in another trust account. So the Act gives that guideline as to that can be also facilitated. So what must be provided to the board upon making withdrawals from the trust account? All right, so the board wants to know when funds are withdrawn and the justification for that withdrawal. So in one instance where stamp duty or transfer tax is a reason, we will need necessary justification for that purpose. The certificates from the QS to allow for the withdrawals. Because what happens is we want to know that the withdrawals are in keeping with Act 1 and that the charge has to be lodged to protect the purchaser's interests. So for argument's sake, 20 million has been collected from purchasers. QS would have shown, based on the report, 10 million works on the ground. The Act stipulates up to 90% of the funds based on the certification from the QS can be withdrawn. So 90% of 10 million can be withdrawn from the trust account, but the charge has to be lodged on the title because those funds are utilized in the project. And the only way to refund or allow for the purchaser's protection of those funds is by the charge. So once the scheme is complete, then there's some sort of protection for the purchaser and for the developer because he would have been in compliance in relation to how he used the funds and how he would have reported to the board. The purchaser would have gotten some protection as it relates to their interest is actually covered in the development scheme. All right. So withdrawals for the purposes of opening another trust account. So we need certified statement from the authorized financial institution with which the funds were held, certified statement from the authorized financial institution to whom funds will be transferred, and the usual report as to who the fund represents based on the monies being placed in the new trust account under Section 29(2) and 17 of the Real Estate Deals and Developers Regulation, 1988. So withdrawals made in a development scheme when the scheme is complete and obligations on a prepayment contracts have been satisfied, the board will want certification re the development that it has been complete. So whether it be the compliance certificate from the municipal corporation for the subdivision and or the practical completion certificates for the units issued by the relevant professional. I know there would have been some amendments to the Billing Act where there's an occupancy certificate. Well, as soon as the regulations are complete, then the necessary certification can be provided in that regards in relation to those kind of developments. All right. So withdrawals made when prepayment contracts are rescinded, report depicting the purchaser's name, the amount of money refunded, proof of refund to the purchaser, evidence of precision of the contract as specified in the contract, statement from the authorized financial institution proving funds were withdrawn. All right. So the board procure compliance from developers by undertaking the following. Ensure that its charge is lodged when purchasers' funds are being utilized in compliance Section 31(3) of the Act. Ensure developers' registration are maintained We also ensure that funds received on prepayment contracts are used in accordance with REDA, Section 31. Funds collected on the prepayment contracts are paid into the trust account held with an authorized financial institution under Section 29. Advertisements are done in accordance with Section 27 of the Act, along with the regulations. We investigate complaints received from purchasers and our developers and our dealers, because we have gotten complaints in those relations also. We detect and investigate unregistered development schemes and developers. So instances where we would have done our necessary due diligence in writing to prospective developers based on information we'd have received. Where a developer is non-compliance, works would have started and it's a breach of Section 35. Or we have evidence that prepayment contracts would have been executed or developments would have been advertised for sale, whether lots or units in that development. Our team will go out to get necessary evidence and proceed to ensure compliance. We also conduct site visits to ensure that works are proceeding as scheduled on the prepayment contract. We require updates where scheme completion dates have passed. We ask for revised dates. At times where development schemes run into difficulty where developers are not able to fulfill their contractual obligation on the prepayment contracts, we may have to enforce Section 33. We have done so in the past for a few developments, but bear in mind, the board is about finding solutions. So if a developer has difficulty in completing the development, we tend to meet the developer and look at various means in which, especially where there are prepayment contracts involved. We meet with the purchasers, get their input. We look at options available in order to come to some common ground in terms of meeting those obligations with the developer. If the developer is not willing to meet those obligations, then we are forced to enact Section 33 of the Act. So I want to thank you. That's it from the Operations Department. There's so much about developers and compliance, and we implore on developers to ensure that they adhere to the guidelines, because it's there to protect them. They play a very critical role in the built environment, and we always want to implore developers. It's easier to comply. All right. Bear in mind, whatever you do has an impression on other practitioners in the industry. We have had issues in the past with certain developments where there are difficulties. We would have to enforce our charge or go to the courts. For the most part, the developers that we have on our register, there have been a few which would have not adhered to certain guidelines and we'd have to take the necessary steps through the courts, but the ones which are compliant, we implore them to continue. Those which are not in compliant, we implore them to fall in compliance and play their part. You understand? Because we are all part of the development of the nation and the built environment. So all parties should ensure that they play a part. Attorneys, developers, architects, and other professionals. So thank you on behalf of the management team of the board, Inspector Department. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very, very much, Mr. Brown, for that most interesting presentation. It was filled with a lot of facts, no innuendos, no opinions, just plain and simple facts as it relates to the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act and the obligations of developers, and also the obligation that is vested in the real estate board to regulate the industry. Thank you once again, Mr. Brown. And now we're going to go into that part of our session where we'll be facilitating questions so that we can have the panelists answer your concerns. However, we are going to curtail those questions and ask that we allow those individuals who are actively in development, the developers, or those that are registered with us as developers, to ask the questions, because it is in fact their day to day, and we really want to hear from them, not discounting the questions that may be asked by others, but we want to hear primarily from the developers today. All right. So we are going to be diving into this session now. And you'll get an opportunity to field your questions to our capable panelists. So we ask that as best as possible and as far as is possible with you, that your questions relate to what has been presented and not of matters personal or otherwise that may currently or may not yet be before the board. We will be taking questions from those in attendance, those developers in attendance, with responses from our CEO, the board chairman, director of vendors, the presenters, as well as from our capable team of inspectors and our legal officer, Mr. O'Shane Vassiana. They are all on hand to address your concerns. I know we have quite a few real estate salesmen in attendance, so I would have prefaced this section by indicating what it is that we intend to do. So we'll be taking questions both in writing through the chat, as well as allowing persons to speak once they have indicated via the raised hand feature. You will be allowed to open your microphone and speak once identified, and we will attempt to take as many questions as possible, alternating between both. So thank you very, very much for your cooperation. All right. So the questions are in the chat. Let me see if these are from developers. Well, I wouldn't necessarily know who is a developer. We are trusting in your good graces to ensure that the developers are given the opportunity to ask the questions. All right, I see one hand raised. I'm going to take that particular question. I believe it's, let me see if I can find it. Okay. All right. Apparently the hand is down. Well, I can't find that hand anymore. All right, so we don't have anyone raising a question by the raise hand feature. All right, I'm just gonna go to oh, I see Mr. Alton Morgan with his hands raised. I'm gonna ask him to unmute and to pose his question to the panelists.
Morning, thanks for permitting me. The question I'd like to raise is that of final inspection of developments in order that the charge on the title may be released. The mechanism for final inspection seems to be somewhat uncertain in terms of scheduling and who is to carry it out. Question, therefore, is there any intention to improve that mechanism? Because the Developers Association had suggested that perhaps retired architects or engineers could be engaged to carry out those final inspections, given that the current inspectorate of the Real Estate Board is somewhat overwhelmed by the large volume of developments taking place.
Oh, thank you very much for that question, Mr. Morgan. The panel will now address that specific matter.
Morning again. Sir Morgan, excellent suggestion. And the board is actually looking at it, and we'll share the final decision in short order.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
All right, we have a question in the chat. Why are people who just own land and want to sell lots and not build have the same requirements of big developers? I think the question is really, let me phrase it. I was just reading it, so I don't know if we had gotten the essence of the question, but it is really asking for persons who just own a land and want to subdivide into lots, sell lots. Why is it that they have the same requirements as big developers? Mr. Brown?
Thank you. The requirements as stipulated under the Act at this time involves payment of the prescribed fee, application form, statutory checks. So the same requirements, regardless of the size development, whether it be large or small, relates. Our turnaround time for most applications would have been within a 30-day period. For now, the Act is undergoing revision, but based on how the Act is worded presently, the requirements goes for all, the said requirements. It's not difficult to meet. However, there are strict guidelines that one must follow upon meeting the requirements to be a developer. So whether or not the development is a 6-lot subdivision or 1,000, 2,000 lot, same procedure. The fees may be more based on the prescribed fees and the size of the development. It's the parties who are resident as a developer would have to undergo police and bankruptcy. So if John Brown owns the property, John Brown do the police report if he wants to apply. If it's a company, Brown Limited, and have 10 directors or 10 directors. So it depends on the construct of the registration one and the size of the development. But the requirements are typically the same throughout.
Right. Yeah, you know, I was just musing over that a while ago, Mr. Brown, because whether or not, if your company consists of 10 directors and you are only going to be selling 6 lots, the requirements are still the same as a huge company with only 2 directors and wanting to sell 100 lots. So the requirements are exactly the same. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Brown. There's another question here. How does the real estate board treat with renovations or what they call flips? You know, when you buy a property and you flip it to sell it. Mr. Brown? I'm throwing that one at you, Mr. Brown. Or any of the panelists, as a matter of fact. Ooh.
All right. So thank you again, moderator. So as stated previously, section 35(6) of the Act. So if a developer should do a development, say 5 or less, then say is that you're flipping one house, not a problem. But if you're doing it on a continuous basis within 24 months under the said name, then you need to register the second or third development. So I put in context before what the requirements are. It speaks to development 6 or more lots or units. But so there are some developers who do a one-off project for 5 or less, who not need to be registered. But if you are doing that kind of development, whether it be 2 units, 3 units on a continuous basis, then those developments would have to be registered. And bear in mind, what is that development? So if the renovation doesn't involve, doesn't constitute developments, then you have to register. But bear in mind, if the development requires certain building alterations, as stipulated under the Building Act, then they will need to register if it says 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 within a 24 months period. I hope that is clear.
All right, thank you very much. There's one particular question here that I believe requires some attention from our panelists. It says, after disposing the last lot in a development, how do you go about deregistering? Anyone?
I'll take that, Mr. Norm.
Yes.
And I'll say the final disposal of, as the question says, the last lot in the development does not necessarily mean that you will not be carrying on further developments. If it is you don't have an intention to carry on any other development at all, for whatever reason, then you can simply write to the board and say, that is my intention. My actions as a developer will now cease and I will do it no more. And then certainly internally we can take that step to say this person is no longer a developer, subject of course to our checks. But in the real estate sector, the experience certainly is that You do one project or two projects in a particular year, but you still have plans to do other projects throughout other years. So the actual fact of deregistration is really a final decision of the individual developer or the corporate director, developer, importantly, to say, I will do developments no more.
All right, thank you, Sir Vassiano, for that response. I must admit that I'm a little bit disappointed that our developers have not been asking the questions that would engage the real estate board to the extent where we would be able to hear specifically your concerns and for you to be able to hear from us as the regulators what to do, how to do, and specifically what it is that we can do to address some of those things, because this is a two-way street. It was meant to be the forum that you can express your concerns, so that we can, in this fashion, address them. But nonetheless, I do believe we have had a successful presentation. You are now faced with the facts that were presented through Mr. Sims, as well as the presentation that was done by Mr. Brown. Both were extremely informative, and I do know that it will assist not only the developers, but it will assist all individuals, real estate dealers and salesmen, in their understanding of the nuances of how development schemes are treated and regulated by the real estate board. So ladies and gentlemen, we have to leave it there. The video recording of this particular webinar will be made available via YouTube, and the link will be sent to the participants via email. So we want to thank our attendees and presenters and panelists, and we ask that you do enjoy the rest of your day. God go with you, because certainly I can't. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.